A very good afternoon and warm welcome to all the august dignitaries present in this second session of e-conference on contemporary trends in literature organized by the English Department of Munger University. We are living in an age defined by multiple isms and have already crossed the threshold of post theory. So, this conference has been arranged to bring to the fore the essential plurality in the nature of contemporary literary criticism, be it in the way of voicing the ordeals and trauma of the marginalized, or like foregrounding the basic tenets of mainstream literary theorists, or even going beyond to explore new avenues in order to thrive in this changing digital world. To cut it short, this conference is a modest endeavor to inspire, intrigue, and invigorate attendees with some, say, pioneering literary representations and trailblazing contemporary theories. Being the moderator of this afternoon session, I once again welcome the galaxy of intellectuals assembled here and take this opportunity to sincerely thank and acknowledge the wholehearted contribution and support of our Honorable Vice Chancellor and Chief Patron, Professor Ranjit Kumar Verma, Pro Vice Chancellor and Patron, Professor Kusum Kumari, Revered Registrar and Advisor, Colonel Vijay Kumar Thakur, esteemed convener, Dr. Bhavish Chandra Pandey, all the members of the organizing committee and the technical staff. I am equally thankful to all the eminent speakers who have taken time out of their busy schedules and have kindly consented to enrich this conference with their unique thoughts and ideas. Um, Last but never the least, I express my gratitude to all the attendees who have made themselves available for this afternoon session. So now, with great honor, I'm going to introduce the first speaker of this session, Professor Sanjukta Dasgupta ma'am. Hers is an enigmatic personality. Besides being an erudite scholar and a charismatic orator, she is an extremely lovable teacher, professor and former head, Department of English and former Dean, Faculty of Arts, Calcutta University. Professor Dasgupta is a person of international repute. She has been the recipient of the Fulbright Postdoctoral Fellowship and Fulbright Scholar in Residence Grant, Australia India Council Fellowship, Gender Studies Fellowship Grant, among many others. She has served as the chairperson of the Commonwealth Writers' Prize jury panel at Melbourne and Malta in 2004-2005 and was granted the Charles Wallace Trust UK Translator Fellowship to work on her project on Tagore's daughters at the University of East India. She was also the co-principal investigator of the India-US Knowledge Initiative Program and is the President Executive Council of the Indian Poetry and Performance Library, ICCR, Kolkata. She has been invited to participate in conferences and lectures at universities in the USA, UK, Europe, Canada, and Australia over the years, and has recently received the Women Achievers Award in 2019. Professor Dasgupta is also a poet, short story writer, critic, and translator. Among her published books are the novels of Huxley and Hemingway, A Study in Two Planes of Reality, responses, selected essays, then snapshots, dilemma, first language, more light, Lakshmi Unbound, and Sita's Sisters, all of which are collections of poetry. Her stories, Mani Mahesh, Swadesh, Tagore's patriotic songs, which are all translations, and Abuse and other short stories. Some of her areas of interest are post-colonial theory and texts, colonial and post-colonial women's writing, gender studies, migration and diaspora studies, literature and film studies, creative writing, and translation studies. That was ma'am's lustrous bio note. Today she is going to deliver her lecture on Diasporic Narratives of Indian American Women Writers. It's an honor to have you with us today, ma'am. We are looking forward to a very engrossing lecture in the coming hour. So now I humbly request you to take over this virtual platform. It's all yours.
Thank you, Rimpi, for that very generous introduction. And of course, it is a matter of joy for any teacher to see a student, now a faculty member of a university, inviting the teacher to prove herself without embarrassment. So I must thank you for this invitation. And I must specially thank the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Verma, Dr. Pandey, Onindo, Otonu, and of course Rimpi for this very kind invitation and this rich opportunity to meet all of you on the same platform while strictly maintaining social distancing. My presentation should be in two parts. I use the word should because I'm never really confident about my PPT happening till it does. In the first part, I will elaborate on some of the main issues that define what we understand as diasporic narratives by women writers, Indian women writers specifically in this case, because this gendered approach is a little different from diasporic writers who are male writers generally and are extremely well known. All of us read them all the time, like Salman Rushdie, Amitav Ghosh, when he spent most of his time outside the country at one time, Rohinton Mistry, and many others. But their approach is markedly different from that of the Indian women writers who have been critiquing the identity of the diasporic subject in a way that we do not find in the writings of the male writers. Longing for what one has to leave behind and longing to belong to a new space is perhaps a one-liner of the immigrant experience. History in the making is how an immigrant woman writer recently described diasporic narratives. In the last 6 decades, the identity of an individual and the politics of identity have become increasingly more complex, with migration emerging as a preferred lifestyle choice of educated and cultured Asian urban middle classes. Invariably contentious, migrant women's writing has addressed the crucial problematics of the double bind of race and gender, that shifting of home and homeland expectedly engage. Moving from a known but deprived space, say Asia, to the unknown space of promised opportunities, specifically USA in this case, seems to be the primary motivating factor that has generated the migration of skilled labor from relatively disadvantaged locations to more advantaged ones. Along with race and gender, however, class, that is, economic class, too, plays a crucial role in this flow of immigration by choice. The dichotomous situation emanates from the desire of skilled middle class professionals to make the land of opportunity their new home and simultaneously resist the host culture. Desire for material success and related opportunities and nostalgia for the world left behind result in the confusion and conflict that are reiterated with agony, angst, and lately with wit and humor in Indian American or even Asian American women's writing. The double bind becomes more complex as the migrant gets translated into a new identity. As an Indian American, and interracial encounters and cultural heterogeneity result in redefinition of identity on multiple levels. An overpowering guilt complex leads to resistance to assimilation, the melting pot symbol that is considered by many first generation immigrants to be as transgressive as acts of betrayal and infidelity. Melting pot, as you know, implies total assimilation. Maintaining a sense of alienation from the mainstream culture and clinging to the culture of the voluntarily abandoned homeland is a romantic act of fidelity that perhaps exonerates the feeling of guilt. However, in the writings of second generation immigrants, guilt is replaced by bicultural confusion. I will try to examine the sameness and differences in first and second generation immigrant Indian American women's writing with specific references to the texts of Bharati Mukherjee, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, Jhumpa Lahiri, and Tanuja Desai Haider, as well as Kiran Desai. Displacement, dispossession, relocation, hybridization, mongrelization are the essential reference in migrant writing that negotiate both local cultures and the culture of the metropolitan centers. The result can be a clash, crisis, or chaos of cultures and chaos of civilizations on the move, redefining the traditionally understood, historically, culturally, socially, epistemologically well defined demarcations of political and cultural identity. In all this, the sense of loss is pervasive and constant. The mode in which the sense of loss is negotiated or sublimated in the exciting variable for a world where interracial, multicultural, pluralistic, transnational, multi-religious identities are created as erstwhile conservative ideologies of nation and nationality are redefined and remembered. In the geographical locations of their origin, a particular type of physical appearance and the use of native languages for communication are an inherent part of the entire socio-political and cultural structures. However, when individuals or groups of individuals move from the location of their politically legitimate origins to that of the alien other, the complexities of redefining the self become a crucial issue. Skin tone is a visual representation that generates racial discrimination and arrogance. However, such problems have never deterred the human race from migrating to faraway, unfamiliar locations with the dream of setting up a more secure and prosperous home for themselves and their progeny. Human history is replete with such evidences of negotiating hostile and sometimes violent resistance to foreign intruders, the main objection being that they are different. The recent Black Lives Matter movement probably will immediately indicate what I am hinting at. However, it was in 1965, with the elimination of the national origin quota system, skilled workers, highly qualified professionals took advantage of the Hart-Celler Immigration Act of 1965, and settlement in America became a possibility, though the US administrative expectations was that this will never happen because people will not want to immigrate as they did not have any family ties with the USA. Although there were more women among the post 1965 immigrants, the group was male dominated, especially in the 35 to 49 age bracket. Please try to remember that I am not talking about indentured labor at all, or even about forced migration. I'm talking about migration by choice. The women who did immigrate came primarily as spouses. 74% of the Asian Indian women who migrated between 1980 and the 1990s were married women, even though they were educated in their own right. And many of them, more than 45%, had bachelor's degree or even higher qualifications. Unfortunately, till the 1970s at the earliest, there are no surviving documents, diaries, letters, poems, or narratives by women that could be found by researchers that would be a direct record of the times before the 1970s and 80s. Now, however, there are over 1 million Indian Americans currently living in the United States, and statistics prove that they are the wealthiest among the Asians and the third largest Asian group in the USA, ahead of the Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese, and behind the Chinese and the Filipinos. The post 1965 Indian immigrants who settled in the USA by voluntarily leaving their own country for economic gains and material advantages, however, experienced a state of shock on arrival at the land of opportunities. From the status of a citizen of one's own country, newly independent and stepping ahead towards self-reliance in a free democratic political environment, the Indian citizen had to redefine himself or herself as a resident alien, green card, green card holder, ethnic minority, affiliate and model silent minority in social conduct. This caused extreme stress to the male Indian outside his home, at work, and as well as in public spaces. As a result, the Indian home became a refuge, a shelter of cultural security, validating the fact that though the tan was in a foreign land, the body, the man or the heart was in one's motherland. And so Desh and Dhan in the alien land was for the immediate progeny, and for investments back home for immovable property, business, and non-profit investments. The role of women, who were mostly educated, therefore, came to be extensions of one's affiliations with the valorization of the concept of Desh, Janmabhoomi, and most importantly, Matribhoomi. Gendering the nation inspired maternal sense of sacrifice and self-effacement, and was also a part of the social conditioning, which was internalized by the idealized concept of the Indian womanhood. Educated Indian women, therefore, role-played these expectations of submissive, good caregivers, nurturing not only their children, but their husbands and their parents, and sometimes his extended family of brothers, sisters, cousins, sponsored benevolently for the upliftment of the family. Middle class educated Indian women abroad, mostly married to upwardly mobile men, were regarded as the repository of Desi culture, the preserver or conservator of tradition learned from mothers and grandmothers back home. While men and children in a family were identified with progress and advancement, women were supposed to be conserving the value system imported from the homeland. As a result, women's roles were static, while the roles of men and children were far more dynamic. Women were the stress relievers of the family who very quickly learned to cook, clean, mop, shop, often drive, and wear Western clothes. Indian religious festivals were observed with great devotion and seriousness, and even India's Independence Day was a day for social get togethers and singing Tagore songs, reciting poetry, and eating Indian food during weekends was quite a normative practice and still is. Yet women felt a sense of freedom and power in the alien location, as their husbands depended much more on their support and sacrifice than they would have done back home. Women with career potential, ambitious women who had commendable academic records, gave up their independent aspirations for the welfare of the husband, children, and the family. Those women, however, who were unable to make these self effacing compromises became victims of verbal and even physical abuse. South Asian women's organizations received repeated reports of domestic violence and sexual assault. Those interested may visit the websites of South Asian women's organizations such as Sakhi and Mitali, and among others. Chitra Banerjee Divakarani is an active member of these organizations. When Bharati Mukherjee wrote Tiger's Daughters in 1972 and much later Desirable Daughters, her fiction unambiguously clamored for a subject position in the new location. So, as early as in 1997, in the American Dreamer, which is a journal article, she reiterated her assertion that she was an American. I'm an American, not an Asian American. My rejection of hyphenation has been called race treachery, but it is really a demand that America deliver its promises of its dream to all its citizens equally. So that contention of race treachery as well as the racist slur of the First World in its negotiations or in its rather discriminatory treatment of ethnic communities still linger, whether it is 1997 or 2020. In the same text, Bharati Mukherjee also elaborated, I am a naturalized US citizen, which means, unlike native born citizens, I had to prove to the US government that I merited citizenship. What I didn't have to disclose was that I desired America, which to me is the stage for the drama of self transformation. So, this internalization of the American dream is what Bharati Mukherjee states so candidly without any hypocrisy whatsoever. In Desirable Daughters, which is a novel written in 2002, Bharati Mukherjee deliberately tried to erode nostalgic affiliations for the sense of Indianness that immigrants seem to cling to as a result of their confusion of identity. And so in Desirable Daughters, she critiques the roles of certain of these immigrant populations, in this case, a particular family who lived in New Jersey. She writes, she lives in Upper Montclair, New Jersey, in a nice part of a nice town with many Indians in the neighborhood. She and Harish socialize almost exclusively with Indians. In the nearly 25 years that she has been in the United States, she has become more Indian than when she left Calcutta. Unquote. I'll move over to Chitra Banerjee Divakarani, who also explores and exposes similar themes of Asian claustrophobia and Western liberation in her book of short stories, Arranged Marriage, and many other of her texts. When I move over again from Chitra Banerjee Divakarani to Jhumpa Lahiri, however, there is almost a paradigm shift. Jhumpa Lahiri is not a first generation immigrant. Jhumpa Lahiri is a second generation immigrant, if at all we can identify her with what we regard as homeland for Bharati Mukherjee and Chitra Banerjee Divakarani. Jhumpa Lahiri was not born in India. Jhumpa Lahiri was not educated in India. So Jhumpa Lahiri is the second generation immigrant whose association with India would be like that of a tourist. And so I remember the famous, very well-known literary journal, which is published from Calcutta, Desh, a Bengali journal of great repute, stated that, well, Jhumpa Lahiri is our new Bengali writer. One really wondered whether the editor of Desh had done his or her homework properly. So Jhumpa Lahiri's Interpreter of Maladies, her first book of short stories, and The Namesake, again became very, very popular, the second one, due to the film, because nowadays we do not really read books. Book reading is for dinosaurs. So we find that in Namesake too, she represents the reiterated ethnic essentialisms and the exotica, but she has now identified the recognizable signifiers of South Asian second generation women writers. In the second generation Bengali American immigrant writer Jhumpa Lahiri's novel, therefore, we find that the protagonist Gogol wanted to free himself from his Russian name and change it to Nikhil. His first generation immigrant father, teacher at Harvard, assured him, in America, anything is possible. Do as you wish. That's like a slogan. Very interestingly, in the same year that Namesake was published, that is in 2003, the Bangladeshi British second generation immigrant writer Monica Ali published her debut novel, Brick Lane, which concluded with this particular line: "This is England. You can do whatever you like." So, relocation to a first world country meant a sort of cultural and social liberation for Asian women writers is something which is not only covert but stated in a very overt way in terms of stating that a woman's identity can blossom in a free environment like that of in a Western culture. Gogol, the second generation immigrant in Jhumpa Lahiri's Namesake, is imbricated in an identity dilemma, however, that his self-initiated naming and unnaming addresses as he confesses that unlike his parents, who had left their mother country to relocate in the alien space, he would not be able to do so. Boston was Gogol's home. Bengal was the home of Gogol's parents. He would not be able to move out of his homeland as easily as his parents had done. Here comes the complexity of relocation in terms of a reverse relocation. He would not be able to move out of his homeland as easily as his parents had done. However, the stress of acculturation and bicultural stress, even on the reverse, cannot be denied as the translation does not seem truly utopian. And so Jhumpa Lahiri comments, Gogol feels that he would never be able to go away from Boston and his familiar world. He wonders how his parents had done it, leaving their respective families behind, seeing them so seldom, dwelling unconnected in a perpetual sense of expectation, of longing. This is from Namesake, page 281. The freshness of second generation Gujarati American writer Tanuja Desai Haider's candid confessions of confusion are insightful and amusing, as she describes in her debut novel, again published around 2002. The protagonist, Dimple, receives a salwar kameez as a gift from her parents, and see the way she even looks at the uh, garment, which is for her an unfamiliar garb. So, this is how she describes it. One of those Indian outfits consisting of loose fitting pants with a long top and scarf or dupatta. When she wore it to please her eager parents, she commented that wearing the outfit had transformed me in their eyes. They weren't seeing the hungover bad girl who felt dressed like a circus attraction. Before them was a good Indian daughter, kheer saver and homely girl, demurely previewing her wedding day duds. A little later in the same text, Dimple ponders. So I was an ABCD. Why hadn't anyone told me? American born, confused Desi. So was I alone in my confusion? Admittedly, my own C was a capital one at this point. So confusion is what the problem is all about, confusion of identity. And of course, the very well known theorist of diaspora, Chandra Talpad Mohanty, had also talked about this sense of tremendous dilemma of the diasporic subject. In this country, she writes, I am, for instance, subject to a number of legal political definitions: post colonial, immigrant, third world, and a citizen of color. And that is the lesson that we all have to experience. And so she also sums up her identity by stating, I quote, for us, migrants and immigrants, that home, community, and identity all fit somewhere between the histories and experiences we inherit and political choices we make through alliances, solidarities, and friendships. Therefore, racial discrimination and marginalization in the American mainstream culture, gender discrimination and oppression in the Asian family system are the double bind that Asian women's writing have been engaged in deconstructing by envisaging the role of Asian American women as representative of well-being and agency through coalitions and communalities. In the 21st century, while mapping the journey of Indian women writers settled abroad, we learned that the journey is no longer about the connectivity of roots in one's homeland and the cartographic routes, ROUTES, that lead to the hostland. That is, the much analyzed journey from the known location of hereditary origin and culture to the unknown relocation in an alien physical environment and its culture is now considered reductionist. Since the 1990s, in the much hyped era of globalization, the journey is not just from roots to roots leading to new locations. Now the journey is not a two-way track, but a multi-stranded network. In other words, diaspora in the 21st century is now about tracking the journey from roots to rhizome, as conceptualized by the theorists Deleuze and Guattari. Rhizome is a philosophical concept developed by Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari in their Capitalism and Schizophrenia project. Rhizome is what Deleuze calls an image of thought based on the botanical rhizome that apprehends multiplicities. Robin Cohen, the other diaspora theorist and critic, has even suggested going beyond rhizome to the epiphyte. And the epiphyte is not a parasitical growth on a botanical primary plantation. So the botanical analogy of the epiphyte is also very interesting. An epiphyte is an organism that grows on the surface of a plant and derives its moisture and nutrients from the air, rain, water, or from the debris accumulating around it. Epiphytes take part in nutrient cycles and add to both the diversity and biomass of the ecosystem in which they occur, like any other organism. So notice how the symbol and metaphors have changed in terms of defining the immigrant identity, from the melting pot to the salad bowl to the third space and on to the rhizome and the epiphyte. Diasporic subjectivities are now far more complex and expansive, as genealogies, physical, social, and cultural environments contribute to the collective identity politics of relocated communities, that is, the immigrant communities that are often described as the model minorities and resident aliens in the host land. Citizenship and passports do not guarantee either cultural accommodation or assimilation. And here, ethnic intersections come into play that comprise place of origin, race, color, class, religion, gender, sexuality, education, and language. I will now very briefly refer to Kiran Desai and her Inheritance of Loss, which won the Booker Prize in 2006, where she makes the taxi driver who has his heart in Darjeeling and his body in New York. And he cannot return. And this is what he says: the green card, the green card. Without it, without it, he couldn't leave. To leave, he wanted a green card. This was the absurdity, how he desired the triumphant after the green card return home, thirsted for it, to be able to buy a ticket with the air of someone who could return if he wished or not if he didn't wish. He watched the legalized foreigners with envy as they shopped at discount baggage stores for the miraculous, expandable third world suitcase. As you know, whenever our relatives arrive from the USA, we are as interested in his return as in his suitcase. So I will just now sum up by referring to Jhumpa Lahiri, who talks directly about her sense of dual identity when she says in an interview that, like many immigrant offspring, I felt intense pressure to be two things: loyal to the old world and fluent in the new, approved of on either side of the hyphen. For my parents, home was not our house in Rhode Island, but Calcutta, where they were raised. As an adult, I accept that a bicultural upbringing is a rich but imperfect thing, it is in fiction that I will continue to interpret the term Indian American, calculating that shifting equation, whatever answers it may yield. I will now try to see whether I can go over to a PowerPoint presentation just to show you certain visuals as a sort of a summary of everything I have been trying to explore and define and describe in my limited understanding of diasporic narratives by women. Are you able to see? Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yes, ma'am. It's visible. It's visible.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just rush through the slides. And so the Great Expectations, Pursuit of the American Dream, Indians Abroad, Voluntary Migration, not the migration which we understand as forced migration of refugees, exiles, and asylum seekers. If you read that famous poem of Bertolt Brecht, which is called The Emigre, you will understand the difference. So the term diaspora, as you all know what it means, I'm just looking at it just to tell you that when it first emerged, it was about nothing about high-skilled labor leaving their own homelands to settle in a hostland for a better life. So the word diaspora itself has been expanded, and it now constitutes multiple definitions. And migration, as I just mentioned, is internal migration, which you just noticed after the COVID lockdown, how thousands and lakhs of internal migrants had to move from their place of work where they could not be accommodated by their employers any longer, and they were moving back to their hometowns. The misery of those migrants, external migration, moving to a different state, voluntarily or not, is very important for us to understand. Emigration, leaving one's country to move to another, and return migration, moving back to where you came from, and seasonal migration, mostly about manual laborers in this case. And what are the reasons for migration? Better living conditions, access to health care, access to better education, better employment, and certain type of political system which makes people just move away from their own country, as we are noticing in the case of Hong Kong. And what are the effects? The government is under pressure in providing healthcare, education, welfare to this large diversity of people of various races, and which is why sometimes these first world countries have such strict immigration rules. But at the same time, the diversity also helps. It opens up the world, and also it makes opens up the possibilities of new skills, new trades being introduced. And of course, if you come from a poorer country, cheaper workforce is something that, of course, helps the first world countries. And which is why we have that huge population of illegal immigrants in first world countries. But if we ever have a seminar on, not seminar anymore, webinar of migrant populations, then probably we can also look at illegal immigration, which is worrying reality, a very disturbing reality nowadays. Asian immigrants in the world, so 72% between 2000 and 2015, the fastest growth rate of any major racial or ethnic group. And all Indians, as you know, even in the urban centers, especially in the cities, all parents seem to be nurturing their children in order to send them away to other countries. So immigration is a huge, attractive solution to a desire for quality life for many in Asian countries. And what is the achievement, therefore? Voluntary migration, of course, to get into the cover of Forbes. So high-skilled labor get into the cover of Forbes, so you can become a Nadella or a Indrapuri, yes, or Indranui, sorry. And so that probably is a target that one can pursue in terms of immigration by choice. And we are thinking also in terms of intersectionality. And here you can have so many identities in the same person. And look at what Amartya Sen says in Identity and Violence, a very important book if you want to understand about immigration and about the life of the diasporic subject. I can be at the same time an Asian, an Indian citizen, a Bengali with a Bangladeshi ancestry, an American or British resident, an economist, a dabbler in philosophy, an author, a Sanskritist, a strong believer in secularism and democracy, a man, a feminist, a heterosexual, a defender of gay and lesbian rights, with a non-religious lifestyle, from a Hindu background, a non-Brahmin, and a non-believer in afterlife. So all these can be part of one's identity, but it depends on what you are going to prioritize in a particular occasion. So when you go to a restaurant, what is the most important thing in your identity is whether you are a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian, or whether you are omnivorous or carnivorous. Yes. So hybridity and mimicry, these are two very important terms that are always associated with diasporic studies. And you are very familiar with those. I'm not even reading them, but these are crucial for our understanding of the identity of immigrant writing as well as the immigrant writer. Third space, liminality and ambivalence is also as important in terms of that space, the third space. An Indian critic had also described this space as that of a Trishonku, somebody who is absolutely in midair, defying gravity, and does not belong anywhere. Bharati Mukherjee and Jasmine is one of her novels, which is widely taught throughout India in the undergraduate or postgraduate courses, especially in terms of post-colonial studies. And the character of Jasmine becomes very important because it goes through multiple changes. And Bharati Mukherjee, of course, which I read out already, I will not read it out again. But here she says, I'm a naturalized US citizen. And then she says, there was no audience for my books. The Indians didn't regard me as an Indian, and North Americans couldn't conceive of me as a North American writer. Not being white and brought up on wheat germ, my fiction got lost. See the sort of a lament there of not belonging and a desire to belong, longing and belonging, or longing to belong. Jasmine, I changed because I wanted to bunker oneself inside nostalgia, to sheathe the heart in a bulletproof vest was to be a coward. And so she wanted to just leave everything behind and reinvent herself, which she did in that novel. Chitra Banerjee Divakarani. All Chitra Banerjee Divakarani and Bharati Mukherjee are from the city of Kolkata. And both of them were students at the Presidency College, and then they moved over to the United States. Bharati, of course, started off with Canada. And Chitra Banerjee also writes about herself, saying, I have a variety of readers from across the diasporic community, not just from South Asia. I like to write large stories that include all of us. The inclusive policy that we talk about nowadays, about common and cohesive experiences which bring together many immigrants, their culture shocks, transformations, concepts of home and self in a new land. So ghettoization of Indian immigrants is not what Chitra Banerjee is thinking of. She is thinking of a wider way of intercultural exchanges between all the immigrants who are now in the United States. It can be a Korean, it can be a Vietnamese, it can be a Japanese or a Chinese. And so Chitra Banerjee Divakarani has also been appreciated by writers like Amy Tan, who, of course, is one of her greatest admirers. And so, interestingly, Chitra Banerjee's evolving narratives, I've written that, put that word evolving out there, because with post-globalization, as I indicated, the diasporic identity now has gone into a change where, of course, it's become much more transnational and post-globalization. And now, instead of writing about the United States, it seems that it is more interesting to introduce the ethnic cultures and ethnic literature to the United States. And so she writes about characters in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and we find the Palace of Illusions is one very, very well read and widely acclaimed book that she wrote, which talks about the dilemma of Draupadi. Jhumpa Lahiri, again, a second generation immigrant, grew up in Britain and the USA, and she started off her career with The Interpreter of Melodies, and Kiran Desai with The Inheritance of Loss. I just touched on all this. And Tanuja Desai Haider is also a songwriter. And her latest book is Bombay Blues, but I have not read it, so I should not be commenting on it. But Born Confused is very regaling. You should pick up a copy and read it. And of course, Jhumpa Lahiri talks about this feeling of being alien. So being a foreigner, Ashima believes, is something that elicits the same curiosity from strangers, the same combination of pity and respect. And then the entire family, that is the first generation and the second generation, experience that sense of disconnect, bound up in an alternate schedule, an intimacy only the four of them would share, because there was always this tension between longing and belonging. And the concept of transnationalism, which you all know about, and how it suggests a weakening of the control of nation state has over its borders, inhabitants, and territory. Cultural transnationalism is possible, but transnationalism does not remain a reality the moment you step into the airport. Try going there without passport and visa. Globalization is a related concept that represents the intensification of economic, cultural, and political practices, accelerating across the globe in the early 21st century. Although many large corporations have been operating globally for decades, the internet has enabled small organizations and individuals to access instantaneously a worldwide communication network. So we are almost there and yet not quite there, in the sense that globalization, transnationalism is about free movement of monetary capital. But whenever there is free movement of labor, there are more restrictions than more avenues which open up in order to celebrate this sort of cross cultural exchange on the physical level, the social level, and also on the cultural level. So, from the melting pot and salad bowl which I referred to earlier, are you feeling hungry seeing all that? And roots, rhizomes, adrak, and the epiphytes. You will often see some trees even if you're walking down even a city like Kolkata, there are many trees on the pavements themselves, and suddenly you will notice that other plants are growing on those same trees, but these are not parasitical trees, but they seem to want to cling to a larger tree in order to feel a sense of identity. Finally, as you know, Jumpalari is the lowland. Like the inheritance of loss, is once again looking back at a reversal in terms of a return and in terms of that two-way traffic of being able to return and also being able to be a part of two cultures seamlessly and to belong, and also without that sort of a longing which can be sometimes very stressful. And finally, therefore, I would come to the end of my presentation today. In fact, therefore, I would like to sum up. It is due to this rapid transformation and enabling cultural two-way flow of the local and global, it is now perhaps time to position and reposition the diasporic subject, not through the lens of the great writers alone, but through a monolingual representation, but to let the migrants see their transnational selves as they appear in the gaze of their home people, as they are represented in the many regional languages of India and South Asia. This inevitably leads us to re-emphasize the oft-reiterated urgent need for more translated versions of ethnic literature like that of Nabanita Devsen, who has 4 brilliant diasporic novels written in Bangla. I think they have been translated into English lately. I'm not too sure whether they have been released yet by the press due to the unprecedented times that we are going through. But this sort of a comparative study is crucial in our understanding of the diasporic subject, because this will contribute towards a more holistic understanding of the two-way flow of transnationalism and a desire to belong not here or over there, but a desire to flow into the realm of everywhere. And so my final slide. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your mesmerizing lecture. It was an oral treat to listen to you. You have acquainted us with some very important key terms and key concepts related to the diasporic identity, the dilemma of the in-between state, and how more often than not this experience becomes all the more traumatizing when the person in exile turns out to be a woman, because this constructed other is further ostracized on account of being a member of the second sex. So what is basically necessitated is a sense of universal togetherhood in order to transcend rigid barriers and boundaries. Okay, ma'am. So, because we are running short of time now,
Right.
I will quickly move on to a very brief interactive session. And I request all the participants to post their questions in the chat box section. And the first question is from Mr. Shoika Chakraborty. And it goes, do you think the replacement of roots with ROUTES roots has eventually resulted in the creation of a trans space regarding uh, actantrism ontology?
Uh, Symbols and should I answer or should I take all the questions together?
No, ma'am, you can answer this question first.
Okay. Okay. Symbols and metaphors to describe the cultural location of an identity sometimes is restricted to the intellectual space. As you uh, correctly pointed out, it could be a trans space, it could be a meta text, and therefore, I personally think that we cannot really replace, which is why in that particular slide I retained roots. And then I also inserted rhizome and epithet because I thought that it was necessary to see how the discourse was becoming increasingly more and more complex. But to be able to totally deroot in order to reroute is not possible, but it is fully possible in case of the second, third, fourth generation immigrants, which is precisely what is happening. A fourth generation immigrant would be a rhizome identity rather than a roots identity.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. The next question is from Vishaka. Sajan, ma'am, ultimately, under diaspora, a hybrid race never able to fit in homeland nor in any place where they settled. Okay, so the question goes, isn't the diaspora a hybrid race which is never able to fit in homeland nor in any place where the person or the community settles?
Yes, that is precisely what I had been talking for this 1 hour. That is the sort of tensions and stress that one has in terms of whether one belonged to a particular location. And so it is about uprooting, rerouting, relocating, and then to find out your own acceptance. And acceptance becomes a huge challenge because visually also ethnic communities look very different. And so there is always this anxiety whether whether you really belong or not. So, but then we have to think these differences and think in terms of a cultural inclusiveness. Hybridity is how it starts, hybridity continues, but inclusiveness is the goal.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. The next question is, do you agree that diasporic subjectivity has replaced the term diasporic identity?
I think you can use both. I thought that diasporic subjectivity sounded more impressive.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. The next question is, why is diaspora literature basically divided into American Bengali or American Gujarati or American Tamil literature? Can't it be a pan-Indian experience?
Unfortunately, that is what I also used to think till I uh, uh, lived in America for a period of time. And then I understood that regional identity becomes very important when you are out of your own country. It is not so strong when you are in your own country, where we talk about our pan-Indian identity. But out there, because you are splintered, don't live together. Say somebody lives in Nebraska, another person lives in New York, there is another group in California, another group in Chicago. And so the coming together also is not in terms of Indian, but the moment you reach there, you go into the net to find out Bengali associations. You look for Gujarati associations, and you will hardly find an Indian association. We are argumentative Indians, and to be together, all the 28 states together, I don't think we can do that very harmoniously. That is probably why the regional factors come into play to such a degree, because the what is prioritized in terms of the diasporic identity when one tries to retain one's identity in these alien locations is that of religion, is that of certain rituals and customs. Now, a Bengali's understanding of religious practices is very different from a Tamilian's understanding of religious practices. Yes, even the gods worshipped are so different. We have such a variety of exciting gods and goddesses. Yes, and so, in terms of which temple to go to, the Tamilian will have a particular favorite, which the Bengalis will not think that that is the temple the Bengalis would like to visit. So, in terms of this sort of cultural choices that are available, I suppose the regional identity becomes very, very strong. The Indian identity is not as strong. It becomes strong when you produce the passport. But otherwise, socially, you are more a Bengali than otherwise.
Yes, ma'am. The next question is from Dr. B.C. Pandey, and it goes, Madam, what is the difference between the nostalgia of the first generation and second generation immigrants?
The second generation immigrants do not have any nostalgia as such. It is their parents who force them to feel nostalgic, because their association is only with their parents. They have not experienced India the way in which resident Indians experience their own country. The second generation immigrants, that is the children of the first generation migrants, grow up in a totally different cultural, social, and physical environment. The language is different, the dress is different, the people are different. And so, how can they even have nostalgia? They probably come into India with their parents to visit their grandparents or uncles and aunts, maybe once a year if they do that very often, or they visit in once in 3 or 5 years, and it's for not more than for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So for the second generation immigrants, there can be no nostalgia unless they are hopelessly unhappy in the country of where they have been growing up. That would be my understanding.
Okay, ma'am, the next question is, migration and cultural shock within the nation is still a prominent experience. Do we have writers, diaspora within the country, their subject of writing? Would you like to comment on this?
That's a good question, as the Americans say when they find tricky questions. Okay, so what I would like to uh, talk about here, culture shock is something that I think all those who migrate and settle permanently in a different country experience. But the diaspora within which country I have not understood. Do you mean country of one's origin, or the country where one has relocated, there is always this dilemma, the whether you belong. And identity is always one which, if you explore, is a constant self-discovery. As you found from that quote of Amartya Sen that I used, multiple identities within a single person. It's not just a diasporic identity or a Bengali identity or a Hindu identity or a non believer's identity. There are multiple identities at work at the same time. And that is one of the most stressful things for the public, for the individual, uh, that is an intelligent individual, that is a Homo sapien.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable time. It was an honor to have you with us here. And I hope you have enjoyed being a part of this conference as much as we have enjoyed listening to you. Thank you very much, ma'am. Have a nice
Thank you
weekend.
for having me. I have enjoyed myself thoroughly, and I'm very, very grateful again to Munger University, to your Vice Chancellor, to your faculty members, and to all your friends and colleagues, and you in particular, for this very,
Thank you,
very
ma'am.
warm invitation. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Now I'll move forward to introduce the second speaker of this session, Professor I.D. Tiwari, who has 35 years of teaching and research experience. He has been full professor for the last 19 years. At present, he is professor and head Department of English and Dean Faculty of Arts at Indira Kala Sangeet University, Khairagarh, Chhattisgarh, India. He has done his PhD in American English Literature on John Steinbeck. Dr. ID has also worked as professor of Department of English and Foreign Languages, Central University, Bilaspur, Chhattisgarh, for about 4 years. He has produced 12 PhDs and written 7 books on language and literature. He is editor of Literary Discourse also and has been a keynote speaker in many international and national conferences. His today's topic of lecture is Digital Humanities and Digital Literature, a new area of experience and exploration. So now I cordially invite Professor I.D. Tiwari to enlighten us with his lecture. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, madam, for introducing me.
Thank you, sir.
And I must start with address to the Vice Chancellor, who could organize or could facilitate such a nice conference, e-conference that way. So, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Munger University, esteemed Professor Ranjit Kumar Bamaji, Professor N.K. Ghosh from Washington University, Professor V.C. Pandey, convener of this e-conference, session moderator, Mrs. Rimpi Saka, Dr. Abhimanyu Kumar, Dr. Ananda Sundar Pali, other members of the organizing committee, their participants from India and abroad, and your friends who have joined us from different parts of the world on social media especially. I feel happy to be a part of the national level e-conference on contemporary trends in literature, which is organized by Munger University. Primarily, the conference focuses on contemporary trends in literature, but at the same time, it deals with so many different things and different aspects of modern literature that have been talked about by the various speakers. The conference is being organized at a time when the world is facing a problem that has brought in drastic changes in our attitude towards life in the world around us. Suddenly, social media and the digital mediums have become important more than ever. This is a universal crisis, but at the same time, it offers us immense opportunities to redefine and reinvent our approach to life as well as literature. So the newly emerged literary forms, especially born literature, have started attracting our attention, and we have begun to recognize its potential as a strong medium to express our feelings. That is why McLuhan derived the notion that the mechanism of media affect the nature of thought. And he further admits that the unprecedented abundance of information online has the power to steer our reading practices towards what he calls interrupt-driven info-snacking. So V.D. Weil, a prominent critic of digital humanities, identifies certain salient features that distinguish digital text from their print predecessor. And these are like textual instability, ease and low cost of copying, speed, two-way traffic, lack of hierarchy, which we'll be discussing later on, convergence of modalities, and access through content. The digital realm is meant for more labile form of cultural transmission. Unlike print form of literature, it is democratic as well as fluid. It is disorderly in nature, no doubt, but does not cause any disorder as such. It is connected with endless links and allows endless permutations and recombinations. It is rich in variety and quality, of course. The pre-digital media, as a prominent critic, Sharkey argues, operated according to what he calls Gutenberg economics, where it was difficult to own and operate means of production and distribution. He refers to the publication industry and the distribution industry. In the digital age, by contrast, it is easy, very easy, and of course cheap, to produce and disseminate our own content. The distinction between reader and writer also breaks down in the new method, that is in digital method. So thus we see that the digital literature negates the notion that a writer is born. It believes that the stupidest possible creative act is still a creative act. The online reading is opposed to deep reading. The online reading is hyper reading. That includes skimming, scanning, fragmenting, and a cognitive mode where there is no room for boredom because it helps you with high mode of stimulation. So at least with the digital books, you can't say that books are for dinosaurs. As Professor Rasgupta has said that books nowadays are for dinosaurs. It's not true about digital books because you have so many things around you. You are so much disrupted. Sometimes you enjoy that disruption. At least you don't have that kind of boredom because it helps you with high mode of stimulation. The machine reading, of course, is entirely different kind of. It's mechanical in nature, and because it does analysis of text through the application of computer algorithm, it is a little bit complicated as. The literature is moving into digital medium, but the fate of print is not sealed forever. We have one foot in print world and another in the digital world. On one hand, the digital media is strengthening democracy by providing access to maximum population, letting everyone participate in it. But on the other hand, this allows us to make our opinions in solitude. The digitized world begins its life on paper as a digital process, but the born digital world remains digital at every step of production, transmission, and consumption. This is designed to be read and experienced on a screen, not on a page. It can incorporate many modalities not available on the page. It leaves a different kind of effect on the reader. All literature produced today, as a matter of fact, is digital because we write on computer, we edit it on computer itself, and the file is sent to publish through computer or print. So it exists digitally from its inception to the publishing house, where it is converted into an analog. But the writers sometimes do not take the final conversion into analog, preferring their book to remain digital at every stage, including publishing and distribution as well as consumption. You can check it if you want. Okay. The problem is with technology. Essentially, literary and critical discourses have also undergone.
Excuse me, sir. I am
Huge
extremely sorry to intervene, but your voice is breaking. So,
Okay,
can you log in once
what can we do
again?
now?
Um,
Pardon?
now I can hear distinctly.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So the 21st century literary and critical discourses have also undergone change. The epistemological and pedagogical discourses that piloted the teachings and learning methods of literature in the 20th century do not match the challenges of 21st century. The postmodern challenges are of different nature and demand overhauling of academic infrastructure to smoothen the transition of ontological paraphernalia from print to digital. On one hand, the artificial intelligence has facilitated accumulation of humanistic knowledge in the most concentrated form and its disbursement in the widest possible manner. On the other hand, the humanistic knowledge itself is metamorphosing in a novel manner to cater the global demands of academics and markets. So literature means knowledge, in fact, and knowledge is the same goes as power. In fact, the changes occurring in our society have redefined meaning in language and necessitate new theories of language and literature. When we talk about new trends in literature, we need to realize that the term literature is a construct. It is a modern construct, a misnomer for a body of statement made to move the reader creatively. Literature,
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you refresh your browser and
changes at the time of consumption. This is happening for the first time in the history of text. While reading the digital text, we immerse into it or integrated with it. We not only visualize the text but also look a new world.
sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but your voice is breaking very much. Can you log in once again, or can you refresh your browser? Maybe that will be of some help.
Okay. I'll try to do it.
Okay, okay. Sir.
Okay.
So are you there?
Now, hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Now I can listen to you.
Is it better now? Or worse?
There's still some connectivity issue, I guess. Your voice is breaking actually. Um,
Is it okay now? Should I start?
yes, sir. Now I can hear properly. Yes, please continue, sir. Sorry for the interruption.
So, I was telling that digital humanities have redefined the text because it changes at the time of consumption. This is happening first time in the history of text. While reading the digital text, we merge into it, we are integrated with it. And not only visualize the text, but also develop a new world around us. It opens up new neural pathways in our brain, initiated and prompted by the visual data. This process is just opposed to deep reading that has been the source of wisdom for centuries. It is entirely new phenomena, or we have had such experience earlier in history. That is a question. Is it not a continuation of a long process in which we were led from oral to written, visual to printing and broadcasting, etc.? Digital humanities are the next big thing in literary studies. There are scholars who still remain confused, perplexed, unable to decide and feel that digital and traditional scholarship never go together. Primarily, there are two modes available for digital scholarship in humanities. The first one is assimilation model, in which digital resources are developed, these digital resources are deployed to assist researchers in traditional text-based interpretation. While the second model is distinctive model, in which scholars work out of English department, focusing their attention on various digital theories, digital culture, and born in digital new forms like video game, etc. The digital humanities offer opportunities to revisit or pre-existing methods of reading, interpreting, and teaching literature. We need to remember that every shift in meaning redefines literature, and literary people respond to this shift in various ways. At the time of his death in 1980, Marshall McLuhan has said, and quote, "Medium is the message," unquote. He had made this statement about television media and the advertisement industry, but the statement is equally applicable to literature. To shift to digital format than readers of literature. The digital age has demoralized the act of reading by offering various choices. We can begin this argument with a reference of car, which was published as Atlantic cover story titled "Google Making Us Stupid." Talking about the visitor A writes, and I quote, "Over the past few years, I have had an uncomfortable sense that someone or something has been tinkling with my brain, remapping the neural circuitry, reprogramming memory. And mind isn't going, so far as I can tell, but it is changing. I'm not thinking the way I used to think. My mind now expects to take in information the way internet distributes it, a swiftly moving stream of particles, deep reading that used to come naturally as well. Reading here refers to a specific kind of reading, that is, literary. This occurs because media are not just passive checks of information, they shape the process of thought as they supply a state of thought. Digital age demands a different kind of attention. Science approaches the whole problem in a different manner. In fact, confusion, deception, incongruity, and disorientation are the main essentials of a scholar, because what confuses the brain is the brain. A scholar of digital humanities, the
Excuse me,
creative and productive force, these are the creative and productive forces
excuse me, sir.
help
Excuse me.
understand new literary
Hello.
forms
Hello.
in the untraditional manner. This we may call creative disruption. The reading
Hello.
who was inspired by electronic media talks about new forms of literature, a new social role for literature in a way.
Hello.
Poetry,
Professor
fiction,
Tiwari.
and future
Professor
was published
Tiwari.
in 1927.
Hello. Professor Tiwari,
Today,
you are not
that
being audible.
technology has instilled incongruous causing shades and a good feeling which used to come simple and separate to do so.
Hello. Anindya, am I audible?
Sir, yes, sir, you're audible.
Yes. Due to certain link problem, Professor Tiwari is not properly audible or visible, and we are requesting him to connect once again. This is the third lecture of the web conference that we have organized, and in the beginning lecture we had with us Professor N.K. Ghosh, who talked about the anxiety of influence in the groves of academic ruminations on contemporary trends in literature. He talked about the different trends in literature and what are the influences that affect the growth and form of literature. And in the next lecture that was delivered by Professor Sanjukta Das Gupta, Professor and former Dean of Faculty Arts, University of Calcutta, we had a very comprehensive, discourse on what are the effects of immigration and how the diaspora people are expressing their alienation and the crisis of identity that they are facing. In this present lecture, Professor I.D. Tiwari was talking about digital humanities and digital literature, but due to certain link problems, he has been asked to rejoin, reconnect, and let us see whether his connectivity problem is solved or not. And in this the second day, we'll have Professor H. Kalpana, head Department of English and Comparative Literature, Pondicherry University, and she will be talking about introduction to chaos theory. In the second day, session 4, we'll have Professor Madhusmita Pati, Professor.
So I'm here. Sorry,
Yes,
friends,
yes,
because
yes,
of
sir.
this
Yes, Professor Tiwari is
disruption and
back.
all that.
Yes, yes,
I'm
sir.
in fact talking about these things, and I started suffering from these things. We're talking about
Yeah, yeah,
digital disruptions and all that.
yeah,
Sorry
yeah.
for this disruption. So I was talking about Virginia Woolf, who was inspired by electronic media talks about new forms of literature, a new social role for literature in a essay, Poetry, Fiction, and the Future, that was published in 1927. She believes that technology has instilled incongruous logic into modern mind. She writes, feeling which used to come simple and separate do so no longer. Beauty is part ugliness, amusement part disgust, pleasure part pain. As a result, the old forms of literature no longer serve and they require updating. Unquote. So she responds to the change with enthusiasm and visualizes new forms to encounter new historical situations as well as new readers. Recently, born multimedia forms force us to reconsider the boundaries of literature because these boundaries reinvent pre-existing markets and ideas. The boundaries of literature have been obliterated because of this digital revolution, and now there are no actual boundaries except virtual ones. It is true that periods of transition have intended to be productive moments for literary thinking, presenting opportunities to understand better what literature is and how it can be adopted to thrive in new environments. The present transition, unlike previous ones, is global in nature. The only difference is that it reached us with great speed and we were caught unaware. Perhaps we were not prepared for it. If you look at the broad canvas, you will realize that nations have become multicultural due to rapid industrialization, digitization, and globalization. Now, this has provided us opportunity to find out new trends in literature. But we need to remember the definition of literature is not the same old traditional definition that includes digital literature, video game, and all that. So when we talk of the new trends, we have to include all those things, which are the part of literature now. So now, another interesting thing is that nothing is local nowadays. No issue is a local issue. And every issue that we face becomes global instantly. Interestingly, even after this much of change because of digital media and all that, our problems remain the same. Humanity is still facing the same problems which it faced in 20th century or even before that. So another aspect of this digital revolution is the rapidity. And this rapidity intensifies the social issues at different levels, forcing nations to change their policies and their discourses. So because of this digital revolution, our discourses have also changed. It has affected very seriously the whole thing. This has led to multiple changes in national policies, generating extensive discussion at political, social, and cultural level. So these developments have given new lease of life to capitalism and liberalism, and they have opened opportunities for new social and cultural ideas. And these new social and cultural and political ideas, they help us to identify and develop new trends in literature. The key issues that have been problematized in newly reinvented literary forms, as well as in mainstream literature, are anti-racism, post-colonialism, transculturalism, and transnationalism, etc. These movements get unfolded at national and international level and encourage critical thinking across disciplines like sociology, economics, and literary studies, impacting our cultural and literary landscape, and of course, different types of discourses. Literature now has to accommodate new social and political issues and realities, such as migration, multiculturalism, human rights, and neo-nationalism that has been the talk of the day in many nations nowadays, especially in 21st century. The transformation of social and cultural circumstances have foregrounded certain other things dealing with difference and diversity, gender and sexual orientation, ethnic and religious identities, etc. So we find that most of the issues that we are discussing nowadays in 21st century even, they are the same. But certain new things have also come up because of the social and political changes that are occurring. I would say more because of digital revolution. The complex cultural and social realities of diversity vis-a-vis majority and minority peep through digital literature, cinema, Facebook, video game, and YouTube, etc. These and many other issues provide us narratives that can be studied and researched to enrich our literary sensibilities. For example, nowadays and during this COVID-19, there are so many people who are writing on social media. I think that they were never so vocal as they have become nowadays. And if you read the content that has been there on the social media, you find that it could provide very rich content for mainstream literature. So there is no dearth of new trends as such. There are so many new things that are occurring, and literature can feed on that. And these, all these narratives, they can be studied and researched because they enrich our literary sensibilities. Because the very definition of literature has changed, and now it encompasses new forms like graphic novel, SMS novel, online poetry. In fact, medium was never as ubiquitous as it is today. It has further deconstructed the role of writer and publisher. Likewise, languages were never so meaningfully used as tools of communication. Thus, the new medium has changed age-old concept of ontology as well. Due to change in medium, the methodology to critique literature and language has also undergone a huge change. The digital humanities put writers, critics, and readers on the same pedestal. There was a time when a small number of writers confronted with large number of readers. But the digital literature has done away with the distinction between a reader and a writer. So previously, reader was mostly passive. Now he is an active participant. There is ample historical evidence to suggest that we are entering a golden age of literature. The conditions are in place for digital literature, a renaissance. This I say because if you read the shift in medium, we read the history of the shift in medium, you find that every time there was a shift, there was a huge change, not only in literature, but the way literature was being received, in its distribution, in its production, its dissemination, all was changed every time. Mark Poster, a prominent critic, in What is the Matter with the Internet, that came in 2001, argues that this shift to digital textuality elicits a re-articulation of the author from the center of the text to its margins, from the source of meaning to an offering, a point in sequence of continuously transformed matrix of signification, unquote. So that is at least one genre is there that has been picked up very rapidly on internet, that is fiction. So fiction is the form of contemporary digital authorship that best demonstrates the new idea. A new form of fiction, which is known as fan fiction or fanfic or fic, is fiction about characters or setting from an original work of fiction created by fans of the work rather than by its creator. It was in 1893. Fans wrote new adventures of Sherlock Holmes after Conan Doyle tried to kill him at Renwich Falls. So this term came in vogue in 1960s, as a matter of fact, through homemade publication called fanzines, 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 but became very popular in the age of internet. So fanfiction.net is the website, fanfiction.net, where writers, especially from marginalized section, post their writings. So this genre is defined as derivative amateur writing. Interestingly, fan fiction writers call themselves not unoriginal, but anti-original. This idea has deconstructed the notion of authorship because there are so many writers, and all these writers, they say they are authors, and they do it collaboratively. So we may discuss the cultural and literary merits of fan fiction, but these authors have a large readership and align themselves with alt-lit, that is a movement, alternative literature. The term came into circulation in America in 2010. The term speaks for a community, a medium, a style, and a particular subject matter. These authors extensively use social media platforms. It is created on and distributed through social media. The proponents of alt-lit, that is alternative literature, do digital self-publishing and believe that they have rescued literature from the hierarchy and tyranny of print medium. They believe that time has come when literature should be only online. Steve Rosenbach, a leading figure in alt literature, says, and I quote, "Print is dead. Publishers are dead. Academia is dead. Border, that is the bookstore chain and all that, is dead. Literary journals are dead," unquote. But we need to understand, and this seems to be true, that digital textuality is the only textuality that has to survive in future. The contemporary literature has developed so many new trends that need to be explored, especially digital humanities and digital literature. While the old theories and discourses will always be there, the contemporary exigencies have provided us opportunities to look into new forms and methods to create and critique in a new way. The digital humanities, digital literature especially, demands new methods of exploration with new tools based on algorithm and data. So can we say, if I use the term that has been used by Yuval Harari, the term he uses is dataism. And he says that dataism is the new religion, as a matter of fact. So can we say that dataism is the new religion and literature is what data enables us to understand? So all literature is a data. As Yuval Harari says that every organism is algorithm. So literature is nothing but data. So thus we find that digital humanities emphasize on data intensive and evidence based academic activities as they are done in engineering and natural sciences. This kind of cyber scholarship promotes innovative research methods. This opens up a whole new area of interdisciplinary collaboration. This kind of research is based on a lot of data of different categories like born digital data, transactional data, historical records, archived data, and genetic data. So this kind of
We have again missed contact with Professor Tiwari. He was presenting a very interesting topic of how the new media, social media, has changed the texture of literature, and how alt literature, alt lit has become the craze, and how everything has become dataism, became the new religion, and how literature is being converted into data. It was quite interesting, and it was. But this is the irony uh, of our digital age, that when we are talking about digital humanism, we are facing problems with digital connectivity. So let us hope that Professor Tiwari gets in our touch once again and finishes his very interesting uh, presentation on digital humanism. Uh, this type of lack of connectivity is quite expected. The two sessions went off very the earlier two lectures went off very smoothly, but there must be certain local internet connectivity problem that is being faced, and it is expected that Professor Tiwari will be back very soon. And in the meantime, let us know the the other about the other speakers that are going to follow on the next day. We have Professor H. Kalpana from Pondicherry talking on introduction to chaos theory, and there is another slot in which Professor Madhusmita will be talking about Dalitism and gender through the lenses of select Dalit women autobiographies. And of course, in the last session tomorrow, we'll have Dr. Nelikal Jacob, who will be talking about new formalism. And then on the last day, we'll have Professor Niladri Ranjan Chatterjee, who will be talking about the masculinity studies, again a new field. The last lecture will have Professor UK Misra. He'll be talking on the topic function of trauma in literature, a psychosemiotic perspective. As we are living in an age of trauma, uh, that again listening to Professor Uday very fruitful for us. And the last, at last, there will be the valedictory session on third day. So let us hope that Professor Tiwari connects once again and finishes his interesting lecture on uh, digital humanism. We are very sorry because of this problem caused due to connection issues, and it is hoped that in our next sessions we'll try to sort out this problem. There must be certain local issues because Professor Tiwari belongs to Chhattisgarh. There must be certain problems of connectivity, and our team is trying to sort it out. Um, it is expected that the in the remaining 2 days we'll work out certain other modalities so that this type of problem does not occur. If we fail to get connected to
Hello.
yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm extremely sorry because of these disruptions and all that, but I'm
Yes.
about to conclude.
Yeah.
Can I conclude now?
Yes, sir. Please, sir. Please.
So the digital humanities emphasize on data-intensive and evidence-based academic activities as they are done in engineering and natural sciences. This kind of cyber scholarship promotes innovative research methods. This opens up a whole new area of interdisciplinary collaboration. This kind of research is based on a lot of data of different categories like born digital data, transactional data, historical records, archived data, linked database, data generated and shared by internet users. So the popular term, the umbrella term used for this type of research, e-research, because the researchers are from different parts of the globe representing different cultures as per the requirement of the research. The whole team moves ahead with a single hypothesis. Such research collaborations are very much in fashion nowadays. This perhaps is the future of through a diverse variety of organizations. The production of knowledge in Mode 2 promotes heterogeneous practice that involves multidisciplinary team. This is in contrast to Mode 1 research, which is individualistic and discipline-specific knowledge production. So, to conduct e-research, the researcher uses a variety of text mining tools, challenging diverse methodologies and concepts that coexist in literature and other arts. So the text mining itself involves application of variety of techniques from areas like information retrieval, language processing, information extraction, and data mining. There seems to be no scope for old theories in e-research, as it is based on pattern matching, algorithm based. This method has been developed further and is intensively used for sentiment analysis, trend analysis, claim processing, and for processing FAQs, that is frequently asked questions. TACME, text analysis and knowledge mining, is an example of such a tool. The other important tool could be Cactus. So, as the pattern's evidence, computer analysis will render human judgment obsolete in the due course of time, as the data will move to the center of our discourse. Some scholars believe that we are heading towards post-theoretical age, though it is equally true that the entire digital world is full of theory and judgment. The digital world has its own model, assumptions, and strategy. But this is for sure that digital technology has changed the way scholars look towards their material. The method we use determine and affect the way we generate and legitimate knowledge. The big question is, what does it mean to be humanities scholar in this digital age? The answer to this and other such questions will depend on how we assess the methodological transformation. I would like to conclude by quoting Rosenberg, long live blogs, long live free literature, long live public domain and creative commons, long live self-publishing, long live torrents, long live free PDFs, long live pay off what you want, long live internet. I think that this is what this all is what I wanted to share with you. Because of disruptions, I could not continue my lecture as I wanted, but I hope my ideas on such a new topic, but which of course is not in very much in fashion. Still, professors are talking about the old things. That sounds good, but I think this is the time when we must look forward towards newer things, newer forms of literature. Although we cannot do without the old ones, but these are the areas which in fact are going to provide you new trends. And this perhaps suits well also, this goes well with the new generation, because they are not disrupted by the disruptions, and uh, they enjoy these things. And literature is all about that too. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your interesting and relevant lecture on a very pertinent issue, that is how to come to terms with this emerging trend of digitalization, living in a third world country where the debate between universal access and digital divide is very much rampant. Thank you for ushering in the message of change and adaptation in order to survive in a fast evolving environment in this age of transition. Thank you once again, sir. Now I will invite a few questions from the attendees. You can post your questions in the chat box section, and the question will appear on screen as well. So are there any questions? Sir, the first question is from Ananya Majumdar, and she wants to know about the issue of distance education.
Okay. So, what issue of distance education? That is, as a matter of fact, where we are heading nowadays. All education would be distant education. All reading is going to be distant reading nowadays, because we don't have any option left out. It's not because of the COVID-19 that we are heading towards that. The entire mode of knowledge, the production of knowledge, and the dissemination of knowledge is going to be online. So this could be a little bit problematic for us, especially for those who are from I know we people who are old generation, people who are yet to familiarize ourselves with technology and all that. But then this is where we are heading to. The distant education. In fact, when we say distant education, it's not distant education. It's very much very intimate education. This used to be distant education because there was no social media and other things were not there. Then you could not connect yourself with video and all that. But now that phase is over now. We have entered into the third phase of digital revolution, where only touch is not there, otherwise everything is there. You can read the things, you can visualize the things, and this is how the things are going to be better. And this COVID-19 has enabled us, as a matter of fact, it has prompted us to cope with technology in a better way. So that's a very interesting thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question is, do you think that quality of research will improve because creative and critical material will be available online?
See, we are facing a new problem. Earlier, we were facing the problems of scarcity. And now this is a new kind of problem. We are facing problem of abundance. So scarcity is as painful as abundance. It's difficult nowadays to choose and pick. It's very difficult. But as far as the quality of research is concerned, it doesn't depend on the availability of matter. It depends on the integrity of the researcher, as a matter of fact, and the knowledge of the supervisor. How does he supervise? Of course, you may sometimes talk about the resources and all that, but in humanities, resources do matter, but not that much as they matter in the researches, in the sciences, science and technology and all that. But when you come to digital humanities, research in digital humanities, of course, you need very costly, machines and very costly data and all that. That would be difficult. That might take some time. But this is how we have started talking about the human and digital humanities and researches in digital humanities. More or less, researches are going to be collaborative. It's not going to, that phase is over when researchers were done all alone. Now, if you decide to do research, there are so many people who are involved in it at different stages. So whether researchers would be improved or not, that is still a very ambiguous question. It's relevant today, as relevant today as it was relevant yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next question is, do you think that digital humanities would be a shaping narration of imagined communities or will lead to the loss of most human feelings altogether in the process itself?
That's a very interesting question. Technology, as a matter of fact, comes as an aid. It always stimulates you. It never deprives you of anything. In digital humanities also, I was talking about different kinds of reading, that literary reading, that deep reading, and that distant reading. Chances would be there. But at the same time, as I discussed in my lecture, that our core problems are the same. And in any way, no technology is going to make you insensitive to anybody or anything. Technology is always to ease your problems, to help you. And let us hope that digital humanities is also going to develop in such a way that it helps you. There are discussions, of course, that the researchers, especially in literature and humanities, are not going to be that much, user friendly in a way, because most of the researches now would be done with the help of machines. There would be algorithms, there would be a specific kind of data and software that would help you to solve your problems. So plagiarism and all that would be a thing of past after some time, because this technology, especially the digital technology, is forcing us to become honest. We cannot manage to be dishonest. So that is why I would always say that we must welcome the technology, the digital humanities, and the new things that come our way. They would always make our life better. They would always make this world better. Thank you.
Okay, sir, the next question is, please shed some light on copyright issues of online publication.
See, different countries have different copyright rules and regulations there. Usually, uh, if writing is your writing just only for 99 years, and after that it goes to public domain. But now, in context of digital literature, it becomes a very problematic thing, because of the sharing issue. Even if there are restrictions, there are technologies that help you to share. For example, I have a lot of books on my Kindle, and there they say that you cannot copy it. There are some technologies that enable you to copy certain things, and after that they say that you can't copy it because only this much was allowed to be copied. But then there are certain tricks, we use that and we copy that. So copyright issue is there. Copyright issue is one of the issues that is yet to be solved properly. Because on one hand, we are trying to make universal library, and that has universal access. And on the other hand, we have very strict copyright rules in different countries. So that is an issue that needs to be resolved and addressed. Thank you.
Okay, and the next question is, if we see literature from lens of data, then all data will be a sum of signifier and signified. Then how are we going to bridge the gap between what is said and what is understood?
That's a very tricky question. As I told you, digital humanities is yet to develop theories that are accepted by all. But let us hope that technology will, as it will develop in future, this will solve this issue also. Thank you.
And I guess it's the last question. Do you think tools like Google and Gram can ultimately replace traditional methods of literary analysis?
See, you can say that there are methods of analysis. There is no traditional method of analysis. Okay, so that old method evolves itself into a new method. That is all. So Google and other mediums, as a matter of fact, they are going to help you to evolve new. Old would always be relevant to the new. No theory can be evolved in void. Every theory is based on all the previous theories. So for the time being, it seems as if it is something entirely new. But if you explore that, you will find that it has its root in the previous theories. So all the theories which are coming up nowadays in digital humanities, they have their roots in previous theories. We are still reading Derrida and the other critics and all that, and they all are relevant. That is the beauty of the theories, that they are interlinked. They are never in isolation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for your thought-provoking lecture followed by your lucid explanations. It was an honor to have you with us today, and we look forward to listen to you in many such seminars and conferences in the near future without any network issues or any connectivity problems. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank,
Have a nice weekend.
thank you.
And
Thank you very much for inviting me, for giving me a chance to talk about something about digital humanities and certain issues which professors usually don't talk about. Thank you very much.
yes,
Thank
sir,
you.
it was an honor for us to have you here. Thank you once again. I now will request Mr. Priyaranjan Tiwari, Assistant Professor, Munger University, to propose the vote of thanks and formally end this session. Over to Mr. Tiwari.
Thank you, Rimpi ma'am. Uh, I would take this opportunity on behalf of the entire English department of Munger University, the organizing committee of this three-day e-conference, to thank Professor Sanjukta Das Gupta, former Dean, Faculty of Arts, University of Calcutta, and Professor I.D. Tiwari, Head, Indira Kala Sangeet Vishwavidyalaya, Khairagarh, Chhattisgarh, for their lectures on longing and belonging and digital humanities, respectively. Quite interestingly, Sanjukta Das Gupta ma'am mentioned a line which basically all of us are students of literature, and her observation is definitely something which should be a food for thought for all of us. Very humorously, she said, book reading is for dinosaurs now. Whoever is in attendance here, the students, the participants, definitely the problem with this digital era or the virtual media age is that we have given up on reading textbooks. Tiwari sir, though there was some technical issues related to audio-visual disconnect during his presentation, but he touched new facets, presented new areas which have been opened by the encroachment of digitization into the realm of literature. I thank both of them, both of our esteemed guests, the moderator for this session, Mrs. Rimpi Sarkar, Abhishek for his technical and admin support, and all our fellow colleagues and seniors who are a part of the organizing committee of this e-conference. I'll now hand over the platform to Rimpi once again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for speaking. That was all for today. Tomorrow, the third session, which is to be moderated by Dr. Anindya Sundar Pulle, will commence from 11 a.m. and will be graced by the virtual presence of Professor H. Kalpana, HOD Department of English and Comparative Literature, Pondicherry University, who will introduce the attendees to chaos theory. Please come forward and be an integral part of the next 4 sessions of this 3-day conference. And I thank you all for being with us till now. Have a nice evening. Thank you.